Good evening, everyone. Today I'm back with part 3 of Thea Stilton and the Dragon's Code. Today we're starting from chapter 13, and if you'd like to see the previous parts, you can look for them in my playlist for Thea Stilton series. And now, let us begin today's story. Chapter 13. Thunder and Lightning. I was sleeping peacefully when a window-rattling thunderbolt woke me. Holy mozzarella! The weather had changed. I sat up and looked out the window. The sky was so dark, it was practically black. Every so often, it was illuminated by lightning. Thunder rumbled menacingly in the distance. It sounded like the growl of a hungry cat's belly. And speaking of hunger, it was dinner time, according to my clock. I jumped out of bed and got dressed. As I scurried along the corridors on my way to the dining hall, I noticed the lamps gave off a kind of shaky light. I then noticed two shadows on the floor. It turned out to be two of my new students. "Hello, Mrs. Stilton." It was Nicky and Paulina. Paulina smiled. "I'm so glad we scampered into you," she said. "I think we're lost." "No worries," I replied. "This place is like a maze, but you'll get the hang of it. In fact, I think I remember a shortcut to the dining hall. Follow me." We veered right and went down a long, winding flight of stairs. At last, we came across a tiny door. "Inside-out kangaroo pockets!" exclaimed Nicky. "This isn't the dining hall." It was a storeroom, filled to the ceiling with strange objects covered in white sheets. A large, sheet-covered shape loomed in front of us. What was it? I stepped in front of Paulina and whipped off the sheet. "It's a dragon carved out of wood!" Paulina exclaimed. We gazed at it for a moment. Suddenly, a high-pitched squeak broke the silence. "What are you doing here? You'll lose your fur if you keep sticking your snouts where you're not allowed." It was him again. Boomer Well. He really was a most unpleasant rodent. I could tell Paulina and Nicky were mortified at being scolded. As for myself, I was disgusted with Boomer's behavior. Yelling was no way to talk to students or a visiting teacher. Boomer showed us the right way to the dining room. But as I sat down to eat, I realized something hadn't been quite right in that storeroom. It was almost as if there had been something or someone else there. But what or who had it been? Chapter 14. Is everything okay? "Gulp it all down or there'll be no dessert," a voice squeaked shrilly. Guess who was serving dinner at the tables? It was Midge Whale, the sister of the post mouse and the handy mouse. She never stopped squeaking, not for a moment. "This cheetah cheese macaroni is good, isn't it?" she said. "It's a secret recipe." Colette, Paulina, Nicky, Pamela, and Hans Redson, who had turned up out of breath at the last moment, were all sitting at the same table. Violet sat alone and hardly touched her food. She looked a little lonely, but luckily, Mitch seemed to have taken a liking to her cricket. "Isn't he gorgeous?" Mitch cooed. "Look how he's munching on the lettuce. He's enjoying every last bite." I sat down at the table with my friend the headmaster and asked him about the shortcut gone wrong. He explained that we must have taken the stairway that leads to the cellars beneath the castle, an area that is strictly off limits to students. I took full responsibility of what had happened and told him about Boomer's strange threat. "You'll lose your fur if you keep sticking your snouts where you're not allowed." The headmaster sighed. "Boomer is very superstitious. Legend has it that some rodents have disappeared in the cellars. But of course I don't believe it." At the other table, Hans Redson and the 4 mouselings were busy chatting. Nicky and Paulina were talking about the environment. They belonged to an ecology movement called Green Mice. Violet had pulled out a book. She reminded me a little bit of my brother Geronimo. He's quite the book mouse. I got up and went to Violet's table. He's a lovely cricket. What's his name? I asked. Freely, she replied without looking up. Is everything okay? I asked. She shook her snout. I smiled. Violet, you should try making friends with the other students. It's great to get to know different minds and share different points of view. Before Violet could reply, Hans Redson stood up and yawned. I'm so tired. It's time for bed. Whatever you do, don't go scampering around at night. Mitch burst out. You'll lose your fur if you stick your snout where you're not allowed. These whale characters were already rather strange. Why were they so worried about the students wandering around the castle at night? I was starting to think they had something to hide. Chapter 15. A horrific howling sound. I said goodnight to everyone and went to my room to get my rain slicker. Then I slipped off to the south tower to get a breath of fresh air. The rain and wind had eased up, but the storm was far from over. My thoughts kept drifting back to Violet and the other 4 mouselings. Even though Violet was very shy, I had a feeling that eventually those 5 mouselings would be friends. I took a deep breath of cool night air. It was time for bed. On my way back to my room, I passed in front of Hans Redson's door. I could hear him snoring. What an odd rodent he was. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that I had seen him somewhere before. But where? I put the thought out of my head as I brushed my teeth and put on my favorite pajamas. Despite the rat nap I'd taken earlier, I was still worn out from my overnight trip to the island. I was fast asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. Hours later, at dawn, I woke with a start. The most horrific howling noise was echoing from outside my window. There was a terrible whoo, you, whoo-la sound. And then the sound changed to whoo, wah, you. What in the name of stinky cheese could be making that dreadful noise? Chapter 16. The Good Morning Serenade. Look out of the window. Eyes of tender blue. Look out of the window. Down upon one who loves you. My life without you is but a moldy wind of Swiss. Look out of the window and blow me a kiss. Thundering cattails! It was Vince Sky Mouse, that soggy silver rat. He was flanked by 2 familiar-looking characters. By the looks of them, they were the 3rd and 4th whale brothers. This really was too good a performance to miss. I realized I'd have a better view from the window in the corridor, so I threw on a bathrobe and headed into the hallway. Apparently, the headmaster had had the same idea. It's the Good Morning Serenade, he explained. It's an island tradition to sing and bring gifts to the ones beloved. I wonder who the serenade is for. At that moment, Nicky and Paulina peeked out of their room. Violet, Pamela, and Colette were right behind them. It looks like Mousy's size has struck again, Pamela said, giggling. Vince is head over paws in love with Colette. Colette had the grace to blush. In the meantime, Vince went on with his serenade. Look out of the window, soft heart of breeze, or, if you prefer, come to the balcony. Your smile is like a red, red rose. My love just grows and grows. At that moment, Mitch and Boomer appeared beside us. Looks like he could use a little water, said Mitch. A nice cold bucket right in the snout would bring him back to his senses. Boomer gave her a dirty look. I do the honor myself, dear sister. If only someone hadn't lost my garden hose. Don't look at me, Mitch replied indignantly. I haven't lost anything, not a single teensy tiny thing. And what about you? Do you know where my 6 cheese fondue pots have gone? Boomer shrugged. How should I know? But while we're on that topic, what happened to my rack? As they bickered, Nicky snapped her fingers. What do you say we go on and run? This sounded like a great idea to me. Exercise is my favorite way to start the day. We all agreed except for Violet, who wanted to sleep a little more. As I returned to my room to put on my tracksuit, I paused for a moment in front of Hans' room. Despite all the racket outside his window, he was still snoring. How bizarre. My whiskers tingled. Something didn't seem right to me. I knocked on his door. Once, twice, 3 times. I'm an investigative journalist, which means I'm a whisker more curious than your average mouse. Even so, I don't generally enter a room without being invited. But this time, I thought I smelled a rat. Chapter 17. Whatever happened to Hans Ratson? Imagine my surprise when I entered Hans' room and found it empty. The snoring I had heard from outside the door was nothing more than a recording. What had happened to Hans Ratson? I scurried downstairs and went straight to the headmaster's office. What do you mean, disappeared? Exclaimed the headmaster. I found this in his room, I explained as I showed him a mini stereo. It was playing a CD of snoring noises. Someone put this recording in the room to make us think Hans was in his room sleeping, I explained. But the truth is, he has disappeared. Thea, I could really use your help with this matter, he said. His fur had gone white with worry. We must find Hans Ratson at once. His parents will be sick with worry, and news of a missing student will be so harmful to the Mouseford's reputation. Of course I'll help, I promised. I'll do whatever it takes. Before I could finish my thought, Boomer marched in. He looked pretty serious. Headmaster, I think one of the students has gone wandering down into the cellars. The door wasn't locked properly, he told us, and I found a book belonging to Hans Ratson on the stairs. Boomer held up the book to show us. Let's go find him, I said. Chapter 18. Ancient Legends. Really? Nicky asked eagerly. We get to go down into the cellar? The mouselings were very excited. It hadn't been easy, but in the end the headmaster had agreed. I needed help solving this mystery, and my instincts told me these students were up for it. I'd promised the headmaster we'd all stay together. I know I can count on you to not let me down, Thea, Professor D. Mouses told me. We've all got to find Hans as soon as possible. Don't worry, headmaster, exclaimed Pamela. We can do this. Colette and Violet looked worried. What's wrong, Colette? Nicky teased. Afraid you'll break a nail? Colette stuck her tongue out at Nicky. I don't have the right kind of clothes for this adventure. When I packed for Mouseford, I didn't expect I'd be going on underground expeditions. Don't worry, you're perfect as you are, Pamela said. Violet still looked a little doubtful. Are you sure we won't get in trouble? Before I could respond, the headmaster appeared with Boomer, who was carrying a flashlight. The mouselings all fell silent. Let's form a line with Boomer in the lead, I suggested. Everyone nodded, and we all lined up. Slowly, we started down a dark, dank stairwell. I hope there aren't any spiders here, Pamela said, shivering. Shh, scolded Boomer. Stop squeaking and watch where you're going. It's very dangerous. As we headed deeper underground, Professor D. Moses told us about the fricoes that lined the walls. These ancient pictures depict the legend of the beginning of Mouseford Academy. According to tradition, the castle was built by the Vikings. They landed on this island, which they called Whale Island, more than 1,000 years ago. They built their village around the island's largest natural spring. Today's island residents are the descendants of the Vikings. After a few more minutes, we reached the bottom of the stairway. Boomer shone the flashlight on an ancient door decorated with stars and winged dragons. High up on the wall, we could see Mouseford's motto carved into the stone. One more, not one less.